Welcome to the Latino Nation podcast. We're here to celebrate the power, passion, and beauty of our culture. We share amazing Latino stories to entertain and inspire. I'm your host, Carmen Ramirez, marketing exec and badass mom, with my co-host, Eric Osuna, founder of Latin Live. And together with you, we are Latino Nation.
And welcome to another episode of Latino Nation. And today we have somebody truly inspirational. You know, on this show, we want to have everybody from like the people that have maybe through, several generations of success and have had a lot of success in their lives. And then people that are just starting out, people that are newcomers that we see that are up and coming talent. And today we have one of those people. Willy Linares came onto the scene not too long ago, and but he's been up and coming for quite some time in terms of what's going on in his life and what's happened in his life, and that's what we really want to dig in today. Who is Willy Linares? And top line, he's a council member for District 1 of Rohnert Park, and he's also a father.
Yes,
right. That's right.
That's right.
2-year-old, beautiful 2-year-old. Maybe he'll show us some pictures later.
He's a hardworking hustler. And como dijo Eric, in this podcast, the beauty about it is the fact that, we're able to get artists up in here, somebody that's already made a name for themselves. But we also want to get to know our neighbors. We want to get to know the mailman. We want to get to know the people that probably have been through some struggles just like you and me, and that we can relate to. Who knows? Someone might be into politics and might want to be running just to be mayor, president, for all we know. There's so much changes and so much that's been done. And I think who better than Willy Linares to guide us through his journey.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Willy's got a really strong educational background, which I'll let him kind of touch on a little bit, because I think it's important for people to know that your foundation is important. Your education is always important. And by the way, college penetration rates in terms of Latinos is 80%. So for the Latinx community, that's a huge milestone that we've reached, and it's just getting better and better. But he's well educated. But he's gone through a lot of struggles. That's kind of what I want to hear about too, is how he got over that. And I know that a lot of Latinos in the U.S. also are bettering themselves. They're looking to be the better that they can be every day.
To make a best version of Latinos themselves. I mean, Willy, this podcast is a blessing for us. It's a blessing for all Latinos just to get to connect and share some amazing stories. In this case, I know from afar that, you were raised by your hardworking mom. She was a single parent. She was an immigrant from Guatemala. I mean, you can pretty much relate to a lot of what Latinos live nowadays. You lived from apartment to apartment, but you also were put in through situations as a Latino living in the United States and an American that not a lot of people will understand, unless you're a Latino. So with that being said, we also want to thank our sponsors for today's show, which is Tu Lucha, Los Abogados de Tu Lucha, which are here to help you if you've ever gotten injured at work, your parents got injured at work, and you need that advocacy. You need someone to help you, guide you through that workers' compensation claim. You can definitely check them out at tulucha.com. Willy, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. That's so nice to hear. I'm just sitting here like, all right, thanks.
He's like, yeah, that's what I did. That's me. Did you ever picture yourself where you're standing at right now as the District 1 council member for a city? It could have been any city.
Yeah, no. To be honest with you, no. If you would have said, would you imagine you got your education? After a while, I started to believe that. Yeah. But I never sort of saw the path taking me down into local politics and being a council member. It's funny. I have a picture from 10 years ago standing in San Francisco City Hall. And I'm sort of standing in front like that could never happen almost, right. Like if you sit in the King's chair, you're like, this will never be my chair. Being mayor is actually a possibility in my future,
Yes.
So to answer your question, I never imagined my path would lead to local politics. That's for sure.
So walk us a little bit through what Willy Linares' growing up was about. I mean, I know your mom was a hardworking mom. She had 4 kids, worked many hours. How was it like for you growing up?
And you also did some time at the Hanna's Boys Center, which I'm really curious about, because
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
a really, awesome institution. And
yeah.
just
Walk us
Definitely,
through.
yeah. I definitely, not to correct you, I wouldn't call it time. Some guys would joke and call it time, but I'll kind of start at the beginning. Well, actually, my mom is here babysitting today, and we grew up basically on our own with my mom. My father was really not in the picture at all. He passed away when I was 6 years old, and my mom was pregnant at the time with
Oh wow.
twins.
hmm.
And so the
Oh.
twins, yeah. So my mom was alone with four boys, and we were living in San Francisco. And my mom was just always like, in hindsight now, as a parent, as a working parent, I have no idea how she was able to handle everything she did, from cooking
Mhm.
to cleaning to providing money for us to live somewhere, and seeing that hustle, that grind, I can so appreciate it now. And unfortunately, I think it happens a lot in some homes. It's like,
It does.
she's working hard. She's not there to take you to practice or to help you do your homework or to, whatever it is. And
Mhm.
so that sort of led me to my path to Hannah. Was, I was kind of a lone wolf. I had my own reins. I could do what I wanted. And my mom at some point said, no, that's not happening. So you're either going to go to Guatemala with your grandma, or you're going
Ooh.
to go to Hanna Boys Center. And I had lived in Guatemala. I came back from Guatemala when my father passed away. So from like 5 to 6 years old, I was there, and I came back to the United States. And it's like, okay, I'm not going back there. I wanted to be with my mom. And so
Of
that's
course.
how I ended up at Hannah, and I was at Hannah from 97 to 2002. It was definitely, it has evolved over the years, but it was definitely a place where, there was kids there from who had school problems, or maybe some of them did go there instead of juvenile hall.
Mhm.
So, in a way, Eric is right.
You
Um,
did your time.
you
No, but
know,
I think that it's a perception, and I really want to clarify, and I'm going to dive a little bit deep into this because I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people don't take the positivity from programs like that,
Mhm.
because
mhm,
they have a perception that this program is specifically made for people that are either going through really bad situation in their life, they just are not caring about their education, but in reality
right,
it's a program that's there to assist anyone at any point in their life, any child in this case that needs it. And you can grab that tool and make something with it, or serve the time, if you will say,
Mhm.
but at
yeah,
the end of
yeah.
the day, it's not a program what a lot of people think it's about. And
A lot of people go to prison and they come out with they're attorneys or
yeah, bachelors, I mean.
bachelor's degree.
Right. Yeah. No, there would be people in school, because you go to the local school and they're like,
Mhm.
"Oh, you're one of those bad kids," or like, "What did you do that you
Mhm.
ended up at
Ooh,
Hannah?" And
yeah.
sometimes you make up a lie just to mess with them. And my brother was at Hannah too, so he'd be like, "Hey, just tell him this," this really big bad story. When in reality, I just needed some structure and some love, and
Right.
that's what I was able to get at Hannah. There was a lot of structure. I learned, at a young age. I was at Hannah. I was 13 years old, 12 or 13, and I was doing my laundry, and I had a job, a responsibility, and I had to meet certain timelines. You have 10 minutes to brush your
Mhm.
teeth. You have 20 minutes to finish your job. You got to
Yep.
get in line. You got to go pray every morning. You don't talk across tables at breakfast. So there's a lot of structure there that, at that time, you're just like, who cares if I talk across the table? But now, as an adult, I realize that those, um, lessons have stuck with me, forever.
That's great.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
they obviously influenced a lot of your adulthood now. Like there's a lot of things that stuck to you and you see the true value in what you've learned and how
Yeah,
much
most
it's actually
definitely.
changed you. What do you think would have been if Willie's life had Willie not went through a process like this?
Yeah, I honestly, I don't want to be dramatic or exaggerate too
Mhm.
much here, but I was definitely not going to a good place.
Yeah.
It was like the teachers calling my mom, saying,
Mm.
"Hey, Willie is just not doing the right things," and I'd tell my mom, "He just doesn't like me," you
The
know.
typical excuse, right?
Yeah,
No, it's
and
the
my
teacher
mom would
doesn't
believe me.
like me.
Yeah.
She doesn't
You know.
understand me.
My
Yeah.
mom was, she had my back. And so I would just say he doesn't like me, but I could definitely. I mean, my GPA at that point, I was in 7th grade, and it was not good. I was like not cutting it. I was not going to be graduating, and at
Wow.
that time my brother had dropped out of high school, and
Wow.
it was a downward spiral, and there was no real oversight. So she'd made the best decision that she could. And a lot of times I hear people say like, oh, how could a mom do that? Not directly towards me, but in certain situations. But there are some situations where you have to make the hard decision, and that's the right decision, but it's still hard.
I mean, I definitely think in her aspect, it was one of the best decisions. The Willy Linares turns out with the BA from Sacramento State University, Master of Arts también de San Francisco. It's kind of like she made the best choice. And yes, she probably got chewed for it, specifically being a Latina mom. It's like, oh, wait, hold on. You can't hold your house together. Oh, wait, hold
Hmm.
on. You need someone else to educate your kids. Like, it's almost like she gets looked upon, and I can just imagine the stress that was in your mom. As a mom myself, it's like you still get
And 4 boys. Oh my
Yeah.
discouraged.
God. Just
you
imagine,
know
like that must have
oh,
been
Yeah.
disaster.
Yeah.
you
And
didn't
even
make
as a
mac
parent,
and cheese from scratch. Yeah, no.
yeah, as a parent, I hear it too. People, there's a lot of parent shaming just for
Yeah.
Yeah.
different, like, we've been places, people are like, oh, your kid's not wearing a jacket. It's like, you know what?
Mhm.
You mind your
Mhm.
business.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. But I think it's made you who you are, and it's very important that we share this because I think a lot of people will oversee that and will be like, yeah, that person was not XYZ, or
Mhm.
he didn't live up in the hills, or he wasn't structured correctly. At one point he ended up doing XYZ. But it's very important to open and shed light that this is some of the things that a lot of other Latinos could potentially be in. And just because you're in the situation doesn't mean you're less than. It doesn't
Yeah.
mean you're any
Yeah.
different.
Definitely. And it doesn't happen overnight necessarily. Sorry. But just because I went to Hannah, I didn't step out that door and was ready to roll. I still went through my challenges. I had a lot of trauma in my childhood that I had to work through, and I didn't know I needed to. And as I grew older as an adult, I started to kind of have a relationship with my own thoughts, and starting to figure out, where is this coming from? A lot of this stems from my father not being in the picture, and
Mhm.
seeing how my mom had to struggle, and being a victim of domestic violence, seeing that in my household. Those kind of monsters, you can tuck them away for a while, but eventually you have to deal with them. And it's a great thing when you're able to accept certain things and grow from them. And being a father really just opened up a whole different world for me, where now I can teach lessons to my daughter, and I can see the love that you can give a child and build that relationship, which I didn't have with a father. So yeah, the lessons continue, and they still keep going.
What inspired you, or did you look up to anyone growing up? Because I can just imagine being Guatemalan American, a Latino specifically. A lot of people can potentially judge, and
Hmm.
always say, "Oh, you're never gonna do anything. You're good at soccer, and that's about it." But what
um
inspired you, or who inspired you?
You know what? I feel like there's been people throughout my life, that, yeah, I've heard, it only takes one person to change your life, right? Like somebody invests in you, definitely. I mean, obviously my mom just, always, you know, kind of the almost like, you got your BA from Sac State. Okay, what's next? She just pushing and pushing, and at the time not understanding, like, give me a break, but her
Yeah.
just pushing, and she's like, are you gonna get a good job now? And
Mhm.
then my madrina, she's always been there for me. She's taught me a lot of lessons, and she was kind of my moral compass. I was like, I'm gonna make a bad decision. What would she think? And then so you see the kind of the common denominator here is very strong women.
That's
Uh,
awesome. Oh, yeah.
and yeah, and then also my grandfather was someone who I looked up to, and he was somebody I spent time with. Probably my first male figure in my life that represented like a really strong physically and mentally. He was a very smart man. He read books. I really didn't know people who read books, and he was ripped. He was like this older guy, and he was ripped, and he was independent. He was an entrepreneur. He was mayor of his town at one point. And And that's pretty cool. I can't say I ran because of that, but I can't
Mhm.
say that I didn't, when I won, I didn't think of that, you know?
Okay,
And I thought, Papa Kike would be really proud of this, you know?
awesome. So when did you find your love for politics? How did that go about? I mean, you've
Yeah, did you
accomplished a
just like
lot.
one day wake up and go, wow, this is something I want to do?
He wakes up and he's like, Ronner Park needs someone like Willy
Yeah.
Linares in their life.
Yeah, no, so I think it was a lot going on. The George Floyd situation was happening. I was also a new father. I wouldn't say young, but a new father. I had just purchased a home in town here. Our local politics scene was rearranging into districts, and so it made it so meant that the person that ran and the person that could vote for that person had to live in that district. So,
Mhm,
I live in what we call A and B section. And so A section, B section make up District 1. And so only people who live in District 1 can run, and only people who live in District 1 can vote. And so I thought, you know what? I have a real shot here at making
mhm.
a difference. And we have 36 in District 1, 36% Latino population.
Wow.
Yeah, and there's beyond that, there's a 43% BIPOC population. So I'm
Mm,
thinking, wow, almost 50, let's say 43, let's keep it at 43%
yeah.
population is people who don't see somebody within their city council that looks like them, that perhaps
Mhm.
have had cultural life experiences like them,
Mhm.
right? And so I started to think, you know what? Our city councils should reflect our its constituents, and it didn't reflect that. It was just five white council members.
Mhm.
And so I thought, you know what, the people probably need and want a voice. And once I threw my hat in, it was so evident, and people were just really the force behind my campaign.
Mm.
That's amazing. I definitely agree with you in that aspect. I think politic wise, I mean, look what happened when Javier Becerra, ended up as
Yeah,
it's
he's now the top guy in the White House.
so it's
Hmm.
kind of like
He didn't even mean to be, right?
no, but at the end of the day, it's so shocking as Latinos. Like I turn around and I'm like, wow, like you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we actually have a voice. It was
Mhm.
always so white dominant. And now you're
Hmm.
starting to get Latino names out there. And I always question myself, like, I don't get it. We live in the United States and they're very it's, I guess I don't want to say it, but they're very anti Hispanics, anti Latinos, anti this and that. But it's like you think of all the cities here in the Bay Area, like San Carlos, San Mateo, you start to think
Hmm.
about like, okay, if it's so this way, why is everything so in Spanish? Like there's so
Yeah,
many names, San
it's our
Francisco,
history.
it's like, you know what I mean? So it's like it only makes sense for someone to break that barrier.
Yeah, and I'm
Mhm.
telling you that the districts allowed for me to run because it broke them up into, different sections. And so the people that
Right.
You're
live
gonna
within
be
a section
represented.
are representative of those people. And that's
Mhm.
why it was
That's
important
true.
to have districts. And
Yeah.
a lot of cities are going to districts. It's no longer, okay, who has more friends, who has more money. It's
Oh,
who is more representative of their
Broken down
community.
by people. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah, and so
excited.
I guess I can brag for now. I got 62%. I got 62% of the vote.
That's
That's
Right?
awesome.
amazing.
That's a
That's
pretty big
amazing.
margin, and I was like really ecstatic about it. One of my goals was to raise the Latino vote. It went from 20% to 50%.
Look
So we
at
Wow.
you.
increased. We went
That's
to 30%, right? So
if you
when
can
you
do
have
that on a state level,
Imagine.
yeah,
country level,
Why not?
hey,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
We got Kamala Harris as vice
yeah,
president. Why
yeah.
can't a Latino hit the White House?
another
It
one.
just
Yeah.
I
Why?
mean, you have to get people to register to vote, and a lot of people that they're not. And
Yeah.
I think, I had people telling me when I was campaigning, I was going door to door, I would
Mhm.
knock on the door, run back, had my mask on, and asking people to vote. They were like, yeah, usually just, I don't really know what to vote for, but if I see a Latino name, I'm going to vote for them. I'm like, well, I'm your Latino right here.
That's awesome. It's so funny. I live in the East Bay, and our mayor is actually African American. His
Mm.
name is Lamar Thorpe, and he was raised by Mexican parents.
Mm.
Oh,
So
wow.
he was adopted. He
Interesting.
speaks Spanish. He is that African American that will wear the hat. He will wear the cowboy
Because they
boots
can wear it.
because
It's
he
part of the
can,
culture.
and
Yes.
it
Yeah.
brought the city to a whole different level as well. Whether it was Black American or whether it was Hispanic, he was able to combine the best of both worlds. And when I tell you, this man has changed that city and given so much hope, it definitely does change when you see a familiar face or someone that you can relate to.
Hmm.
We know that
Yeah.
race right now is a big thing everywhere,
Yeah.
and it's just it's on social media, it's in programs, it's at the Golden Globes. It's just you can't get away from it, right?
Right.
And I know there's a lot going on in terms of your city and things like that, but in terms of like the overall like what's going on right now, do you have a perspective in terms of looking at the kids that are growing up right now, especially in these communities where that may be going on, especially anti-Asian
Yeah.
contingent?
Yeah,
You know,
definitely. Being a person of color, you have different, like I used the term earlier, cultural experiences, right? Your
yeah,
life is just, it's different. You walk into somewhere and somebody might have a bias towards you, a stereotype.
Mhm.
And, there was also another uh, councilwoman who won a seat this last election, and she's the first ever person from the Republic of Congo to win a seat in an elected office, and she's a woman. Her name is Jackie Elward, and so I think we understand that there are different pressures and different expectations, or different where we might perhaps be treated differently as people do when they go to the store, or like
Mhm.
Eric is talking about.
Yeah.
There's a lot of crimes happening against Asian folks right now, and in reality, it's like it's not right. And we've had some really difficult conversations these last few years where I can say that there are a lot of allies. There are a lot of people that have spoken up. There's white people who are saying, what, I condemn these acts. and
Mhm.
and that's what we need as Latinos and people of color. Is we need allies. We need people to have these uncomfortable conversations and say,
We need our
what, I
white homies
acknowledge my
to come have our back.
you said it. I'm there's going to be racist bigots, ignorant people in any city. That's the sad reality. And it's our job to try to speak out when those sorts of things happen, and really make it not right, make it not acceptable when somebody does go there. And even within our own, like our families, there's some hidden
Mm,
things where people say
yeah.
things, and you got to call it out. You say, what, that's not right. Like that's not cool with me. That's just not gonna fly. And maybe back in the day it was like different.
Yeah.
But now it's like we are responsible to make sure that we help all our folks. Right now, we're seeing people standing with, Black folks and Asian and Latinos, and that's what it takes.
That's amazing. At any point, Willie, I mean, you turn around and you look at your life and what you've done with it and all the opportunities, despite everything you've been through growing up, which is very similar to what a lot of
Mhm.
Latinos go
Mhm.
through here in the United
A
States.
lot, many.
Did you ever question your ability to move
Oh,
forward? Did you ever?
How did you deal with those monsters you talked about?
yeah.
Like, did you have a lifesaver in your closet and you just like,
So yeah, that's a great question. I think I would be lying if I said no, I never doubted myself. There's times where you doubt yourself. You have dreams and goals, and they don't happen. Like I wanted to work for the Giants so bad, right? I love baseball. I wanted that job so bad, and I didn't get it, right? And it's like, oh, am I doing the wrong thing? But then that allowed me down a path to work for the Sacramento Kings, and I made friends and lifetime friends there. And I stayed in Sacramento, met my wife, right, and who has been like the most amazing thing that's happened in my life, and my daughter, right? She helped bring my daughter to my life, and she's a therapist, so she helps process her thinking and gives me a different perspective. And I doubt myself to this day, right? I mean, I think it's human to question, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing it for the people? And try to take your own kind of ego out of the question, right?
Mhm.
But I think dealing with those monsters for me started with going to therapy. when I went to college, it was like I was having a hard time kind of reestablishing myself into like a free open world where I had left Hannah where there was so much structure, and now I'm living in this environment where there's a just a lot going on, and I hadn't processed. I kind of had gone through a breakup, and I needed to process these feelings, and I ended up going to therapy and talking about everything but you
But what
know
you live
but what
for?
I went for. It was
Hey,
like,
Lily, I think it's so important that you talk about that because I think
Mm.
that is one thing that Latinos don't do
yeah, there's
often.
a stigma.
There's a
Oh, que si
huge
no.
stigma, and we
Yeah.
go, we drink we have a couple of shots of tequila, and we forget about it for the day,
Mm.
but then it's still there. And it's so awesome that you're talking about that because
Yeah,
that's
I'm definitely not ashamed of that. That led me to processing my feelings. And honestly, if I had the time, I would still go just because it's relieving to put yourself out there, to be vulnerable, and to hear, like to verbally say what's in here.
Go ahead.
Um, but I've never given up. That's definitely not. I've questioned myself. I've been on the woe boat, like woe is me kind of thing for maybe allowed myself too long sometimes. But
Mhm.
I get back on, and I take pride in that, like, regardless of what I do, I do it at my best of my abilities. It's like
Mhm.
if I didn't get that job, I was working in retail at Rite Aid, I still continued to be the best retail employee that I could, right? Because
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
that's just what I do.
Look, Bad Bunny was
A bagger.
groceries 5 years ago. He was bagging groceries, all right, at
Yep.
Safeway.
And now
So
he's got bags of cash, right?
Right? Now he uses those bags to carry his cash.
that's
Mhm.
right. That's right.
That's amazing.
So yeah,
That's
that's a great example, I think, for a lot of people listening that are wanting to figure out like, what do I do? It's just you have to do the best that you can, whatever you're doing. Like you're the
Mhm.
best at that.
yeah. I think
Yeah,
that
and sorry, no,
no,
I was just gonna
no,
say,
no, no, go ahead.
everything. It's cliche, but everything happens for a reason. Like
Mhm.
I really believe that God puts things in place and takes things that you want so bad away because it's building you up to where you're supposed to be going.
Mhm.
And in the moment, you just don't understand. Like, why didn't I get that job? Why didn't this relationship work out? Why, whatever. And then you look back and you're like, that's why it didn't happen.
Is that
Hmm.
aha moment, right?
It is. It truly is.
Is the aha moment? I should have enjoyed the ride all along anyway. That's the deal,
Mm,
right? Let's enjoy the ride because it's going to come to the right place at the end.
right. Yeah. I mean, it's easier said than done,
Easier
right?
said than done, right?
Definitely. No, I was gonna say earlier, a lot of the people we've had on the podcast recently, Frankie J was one in particular.
Mhm.
He spoke about just staying focused, and even though when life comes and throws curveballs at you and surprises you with things that weren't necessarily part of the plan, you just gotta roll with the punches and you gotta continue to move forward. If Willie
Mhm.
were to see young Willie
Mm.
right now, what would you tell him?
What's funny is I feel like that's a common question people get, but I haven't really gotten that question. I think, honestly, it would be kind of enjoy the ride. Like Eric said, I always put a lot of pressure on myself. And even when I worked in retail, like I couldn't miss a day, right? Or like, it was like prom. I worked the next day after prom, and looking back and say, you know what, take that day off. Just go enjoy the beach with your friends,
Mhm.
or with school. Allow yourself to have a little bit more of a social life instead of worrying so much about assignments and that kind of stuff. I feel like I put a lot of pressure on myself to not to be perfect, but just to do, like, I really want to do right by whoever is depending on that outcome. Or it's like I want to make sure people are proud of me and get the best grades, or like now with the constituents, making sure that I take into consideration all of them. And the reality is, I have to enjoy the good with the bad. When I help people, really truly enjoy that. And I guess I'm talking about the now, but that still relates to
Totally.
when I was
To the
young
young
Willie.
Willie.
Just
Contrast,
enjoy it.
if you like, how are you not going to know what you want if you don't know what you don't want? So you got to,
Right.
That's true.
that's it.
Yeah, that's
See that
true. That's
contrast,
true.
and now you're the you that you are because of that. So
That's
Yeah.
keep
amazing.
evolving. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Appreciate that.
Mhm.
What are some of the struggles that you faced firsthand in politics? I have so many friends
Mm.
that have always loved politics,
Mhm.
but they're too afraid to jump or dive into it, even stick a toe into the world of politics because
They may
they're
get chopped off.
Latinos,
Yeah.
dude. They think that they're gonna get chewed up, spit up, laughed at. And I'm pretty sure you went through some of that stuff. Guide us through some of your struggles.
Yeah, I think some of them might be internally, right? Where I felt some pressure of that, like I was going to be carrying an entire community, like feeling like if I embarrass myself in this campaign,
Like
am I
this
a
is
reflection of my people,
yeah.
right? If I come and represent myself like uneducated, is that, or if I wear the wrong thing, or if I talk with a certain accent or slang or whatever, is
Mhm.
that going to be representative of my community? Is this how folks are going to look at Latinos? And if I make a mistake, then, oh man, like Willie really blew it for them.
Mhm.
You know, I think that is a big pressure that I've sort of allowed myself to embrace because, I take pride in who I am anyway, and I represent myself professionally. And I don't have, I've worked on, I don't care about the expectation of what other people's expectations are of what a councilman is supposed to look and talk like. The
Mm-hmm.
reality is that I didn't grow up like them. I don't look like them. I don't
Yeah.
speak
So you
like
add
them.
you add that extra perspective.
That's
Right. And
You add
and
that
so I
another
can't, and then I never will be exactly like them, right? I'm first of all, the position skews, older and typically
awesome.
white. And that's not what I am. And so embracing the fact that I have to be my own person, that was something that I was nervous about in the beginning. I think also I was nervous too when I would approach doors to how people would embrace me,
Mhm. They
because
would
I
be
am
like,
Latino.
"Este cholo, look at him. Look at
Yeah,
him
yeah.
knocking on
I
that
have a
door."
lineup and I have, and so, I was kind of nervous about that, but I have to say the community has really, really embraced me.
awesome.
And I think perhaps there's still that pressure of, people thinking like maybe, because I'm Latino, I don't know, something. I think that might be in some folks' head, but not. I can tell you, it's not the majority.
That's great to
This has been a great experience so far in the community, and of course, we're gonna have times where we just don't agree on things, and like
Mhm.
you can't please everybody. That's a fact.
hear. Mhm.
But I pride myself on that. I ran a campaign that I wanted to have community input and listen to the
Yeah.
community.
What are your core values, Willie?
Yeah.
Like what's your
Well, my platform, right? My number one thing was I wanted to give a voice to Latinos, right?
Mhm.
And to people of color.
Very
That
cool.
was my number one thing. I wanted to make sure that even though I know I'm not a big deal at all, it's a small city council.
What are
I
you
still
talking about?
wanted to give hope.
You're a big deal. It's a
Yeah.
big deal.
No,
This is
I wanted to make sure that kids that look, that are the mercado,
look
or
yeah.
are
Mhm.
they look and say, wow, that guy is a city council person, or he works for the city, and think, I could do that too, right?
Papa? Is that
Yeah,
you?
right. No,
Yes.
not everybody who's nice to you, okay? Um, but that is really important to me. And I ran on the platform representation matters,
Mhm.
right? So representation, meaning I wanted people to be able to have their guy and
Yeah, the
say
40%,
this
you said 40%, 36% or the
36, yeah, like something's happening. Let me call Willie and see if he could help me. So they could feel comfortable that they have
Mhm.
somebody's number and they could say, hey, conozco a alguien en la ciudad, right? Somebody
Mhm.
in the city that I know that might be able to point me in the right direction. Like with the PPP loans, or, any of these things, hey, I got this permit situation that I need help with. Willie, can you help guide me, or can you check for me? And I think that is what I really, really wanted to. There's obviously some other things that are really important in our world and in our city, like climate, homelessness is
Oh yeah.
truly important. Just ensuring the safety of our residents. We have a lot going on in Sonoma County and really in all of California with the fires.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I'm really hoping that we can make a dent in how we kind of approach local climate impacts. And we have. I'm proud of that. We have a council that unanimously voted to make climate change a priority, along with homelessness and relationship of the community with our public safety department.
Very cool.
So
Dude, I
yeah.
am excited for
All
your
awesome
city.
stuff.
I mean, Willie, we've known you for so many years. You've always been that
Mm.
go-getter. You've always been that person that, has always done amazing things and always goes above and beyond. I mean, when was it that we actually sat down and met Willie? Was it
It was a
1998.
while
2012?
back.
Man, it was a while back.
It
And
was.
being involved and seeing everything that you've put yourself through in the fact of, you know what? I just keep escalating. Every time I get to see Willie, it's like, wait, Willie's doing this now? Like, I would not be surprised, Eric, if I hear Willie at state level at one point, and
I
then
would not.
eventually, I won't be
I would not be
surprised at
surprised
you.
either.
You're just such a
Yeah.
go-getter, such an inspiration. I didn't know you had a politician junkie inside of you, but
Yeah.
hey,
Take our call still, okay, Willie? Because
Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
tell us the
No.
magic. ¿Cómo le hiciste? Do you have, I heard you mention God a couple of times, and
Yeah.
I'm curious to know what you do as a ritual. Do you meditate? What do you do? I mean,
Hmm.
you mentioned at one point too that you didn't know anyone who read books, and I think that's
Hmm.
for the most part something that a lot of Latinos can
Mhm.
relate to. Like,
Mhm.
what my mom
Yeah.
doesn't read, she reads the people in español type of thing,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no,
So
I definitely have my family is very ingrained in the church in Guatemala, and my mom reads the Bible. So the Bible, yes, you know,
Mhm.
that's what we grew up on. Hannah is a Catholic institution. I was married in a Catholic church. I can tell you that during COVID, my faith has been tested. I think like a lot of people, right? I wasn't with my daughter being born. I hadn't been going to church, and so that but I always and have always maintained my relationship with God, and that's with me and Him is our conversations, my prayers, my thoughts, my faith that everything's going to be all right. I truly believe that everything happens, and He's in control. You
You know
know,
what, the common denominator with all the successful people that we've interviewed has
it's
been
been
God and prayer and meditation, like the
meditation.
two.
yeah, I think that there's you know there's something about how life kind of happens, right? I mean, it's like I had a friend who told me that every time he's going through something, it goes through really hard, and then boom, something happened. He's like, oh yeah, and he's joked around. He said, God's like, oh, that's right, I forgot about him, and he throws him a
Aw,
bone. You know what I mean? And that's kind of
that's
how I feel
super
like,
up.
I just we have the job is tough, right? Being in local politics is tough. There's a microscope on you, and you go through some things, and sometimes it's just like I feel like things just happen, and it's like, all right, on, right on, right on, Diosito. Like you didn't
Aw.
forget about me, and sometimes you just need that extra kind of push and reminder, like, and I just don't believe that they just happen by coincidence, you know.
Everything happens for a reason. I
Yeah,
mean,
you make it
I've
happen.
always said life is what you make of it,
Mhm.
and I'm
Mhm.
I'm a strong believer myself of just moving forward.
Mhm.
Don't stumble just because that rock, knocked you down. Dust off your knees, dust off what you have to, and just get yourself back up and keep going. You just gotta hustle. I've
Yeah.
always felt that my parents came and migrated to give me a better opportunity, so I want to
Mhm.
take that opportunity and
Mhm.
make the best of it, because ultimately I don't want all of their sacrifice to go in vain and just go to waste. It's been being Latinos is a fun thing. It's an amazing thing that you get to have two cultures. You speak two
Yeah.
languages, and it's also got its hardships. It's got a lot of things that
I see a ton of Latinos out there with hero capes on, walking around. I mean, just a bunch of heroes working in bakeries. You
mm,
know,
Mhm.
a single mom with 4 boys. Oh my God, I can't even imagine.
And who
Like,
knows how they do it?
so many stories, like you working down in Tijuana with your
yeah.
kids, like just so many stories. Like if you get to know Latino backgrounds, you're like,
Hmm.
but
Yeah, and I have to acknowledge too that like my privileges, right? My privilege, because I was born in this country, right?
Yeah.
I hit
Mhm.
the lotto. I don't have to worry about being undocumented. I don't have to
Mhm.
worry about finding work or not having credit and all these things. And
Yeah.
Speaking of trauma,
uh,
all those kids that are going through the kid
mhm,
situation from Central America.
yeah, yeah,
Now, you're wiping a therapist and knowing how therapy is so important. they're gonna have trauma for a long time.
Yeah.
Right. And then, and I didn't have to live through that because my, my
God.
grandma came here to the United States, before, obviously before I was born, before my mom and my dad were married. And so, my mom and dad were married, and that's how my mom became a U.S., resident. And I was born in this country, and so there's a lot of privilege that comes with that I don't think people understand. And we all know folks that go through the grind, that
Yeah.
they're undocumented living in America, and that's, I mean, an extremely difficult situation for them.
And even then, I definitely think that just because you're not born in the US, and this one would go strong for those listening out there who can't potentially say, hey, well, I had the blessing of being born in the United States. Even though you are not born in the US, you are already here. And there's still
Hmm.
so much more you can do about it. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like, it
Hmm.
doesn't just, it's so funny. My grandpa just recently asked me, my grandpa's 83 years old. Okay. So he's always been a resident. And he just recently said, you know what? I think I just want to like be a citizen. And I was like, oh, fine. You
What?
know why? Why?
Oh my
He's
God.
just
How
like,
many years has he been in this country?
he's been in here all my
Like,
life, like
Yeah.
all 30 plus years.
oh my
And he
God.
just recently
It's like,
said, I'm just going to be a citizen now. I'm not going to die until I become a citizen. And it had a lot to do with seeing other people struggle. He would be the grandpa that was walking in the street, and he would see someone and he would help them as much as he could. And it's funny to me because he never wanted to be a citizen, and all of a sudden he's just like, why not? Like, let's
Yeah.
just do it. But he never thought he was going to have the opportunity to learn all the questions. So I think it was more fear and not
Mm.
knowing and not understanding the process, which could be a situation for most of
a
us.
lot
Why
of Latinos have that.
why
Yeah.
just because you're not born here doesn't mean you can't do something. Like, está la visa U. A lot of Latinos don't know that if you get assaulted, if you get robbed, if you get physically attacked, you have an option to become a citizen through a visa. La visa U, it protects you. You're already hardworking. You're already putting your tax monies to work here in the United States. You are just because you weren't born here doesn't make you less than. So it's very important to let those Latinos out there
Yeah.
know you could be
Definitely.
privileged like Willy and like myself, but if you're not, you can still be such an impactful person. It doesn't make you less than.
Yeah,
Amen.
yeah. And I talk about the privilege because I put myself in check that way, right?
Mhm.
Because you look around, you're like, oh, you could think like somebody has it better than you, but then somebody has it worse than you too.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know.
You keep that
Probably
humbleness
more worse
down. You keep
than
your
Oh
feet
yeah.
on the ground. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I agree. I always look back at everything, and I thank God for everything that I have too. But I'm
Mhm.
curious to know, what is Willy afraid of?
What am I afraid of? Like physically, I'm afraid of mice and rats, raccoons. That's what I'm afraid of. Those are the things. That's the truth.
Los
As far,
ratones le dan miedos. No, in
oh
general, like
yeah,
if
yeah, yeah.
overcoming, being shy, being timid. I think a lot of people are always afraid
Um,
to just that one little
to be
extra
themselves.
jump.
yeah, I guess I do have some being vulnerable here. Some self-esteem issues at times, you know what I mean? I think you I regardless of how successful I might have been in my education or my career, it's like at times I do need that extra push and or maybe acknowledgement that you're doing a good job, and to me
Mhm.
that relates to self-esteem because I should have that on my own, right? Knowing that I've done a lot and I
Totally
can
right
stretch.
about that, Willie, and a lot of Latinos also face that. I mean, it's just nice to a lot of things you're talking about apply to the larger
Yes.
population,
Yes.
and that's something that we're not addressing. In fact,
Mhm.
what's happening is on the other side is parents are often they don't even know they're doing this. They're hurting the self-esteem of their
Yeah.
kids. It's making
Yeah.
you suck and pendejo,
Mhm.
pendeja, and all that stuff.
The
And
typical Latino
it doesn't
stuff, you know?
Yeah.
chancla and all that. But
Yeah.
the reality is that uh, you need to hear it, even though you are so successful,
Mhm.
and that's something that we need as Latinos is to
Yeah, even within our own family structure, I have aunts that get really uncomfortable when you give them a hug. They're just not used to it. Or if you
That's
give somebody a
true.
compliment, they're just like, I don't know what to do with that,
Oh,
and
you know
it
what?
needs
It's
to be more
so
open.
true. You're
Yeah.
so on point with that. And it's part of being Latino cultures. It's like we weren't used to getting hugs. Grandma
Yeah.
was always talking about, you no sirves para nada. You're never going to do anything, So I'm glad we bring these subjects up because I think for those listening, it's so relatable to what you have at home sometimes that you might think, well, I'm never going to do anything. But I mean, look at Willy. Willy, you've accomplished so much educational wise. You pushed yourself. You went from being the bad boy in school to not having the awesome grades to, getting a Master of Arts from the University of San Francisco. You got an MBA from Ashford University. I mean, you got a BA. Like you pushed, and you didn't have an excuse for education. You just did what you had to do, and you learned along the way, because you said at points there was times where you were so confused, and there was times where you just couldn't find yourself, but you seeked out information. You found a therapist, which I think it definitely is a taboo for Latinos. We don't believe in therapy. We think that going to the terapista is kind of like, oh, they're gonna put a white jacket on me, they're gonna tie me up, put me in a psych ward type of thing. But no, you don't have to be crazy to go
There's also the
to
stigma
therapy.
that's associated with it, that
Hmm.
your community, people look down on you, and it's just part of the community.
It sucks.
And it really sucks because
Yeah.
it's so helpful. It is so necessary, especially with what's going on with, we've had the world change in the last year.
You just went through a
Totally.
pandemic.
Yeah.
I never
Hmm.
thought I was gonna go through a pandemic in my life,
Right. That's a
right?
whole layer. And in Sonoma County, we've gone through fire seasons. Like it's a real thing
Restart,
now. We
dude.
have go bags in our garage during fire season. It's like people's houses have burned down. That's traumatic.
It's been
You
insane.
know.
But I'm glad that we brought all this up. I definitely think it has a ton to do with, what we're trying to put out there. As we mentioned, a lot of the times Latino Nations is here to hear what other Latinos have accomplished and how they've dealt with situations,
Yeah. How they did it.
how you did it. And we're
Hmm.
very excited that you took on this interview and you allowed us to dive into Willie's
Deep, really deep.
deep head, his brain, and everything that's happening in between. And we're excited. I'm
And by the
pretty
way, your
sure.
background is really cool.
Dude, yeah,
Thank
tell us
you.
a little bit about your background. So I know there's some
Yeah.
of you that are listening to the podcast, but others that are watching the
Watching.
video. I see pictures in the background of snippets of what is that, newspaper?
These are newspapers. Yeah, these are all the front pages of the Giants 3 World Series and the Warriors championships. So
Very
the
cool.
nerd, the sports nerd in me wakes up like 5 in the morning after the championship is won, and I
You
go and find the San Francisco Chronicle and
That's
collect
awesome.
them and put them in frames.
That's cool.
awesome. Hey,
Yeah.
you gotta find your thing, right? Your
Mhm.
inspiration. And who knows, maybe one day you're gonna find yourself being on the San Francisco Chronicle as I don't know,
Coach.
No.
You
presidente.
never know. You
That-
never know.
that
You
ship
never
has
know.
sailed.
When you were standing on that building, you didn't know you would be a politician. You just don't know. You let
Yeah.
God lead
Yeah.
his
Yeah,
his
it's pretty weird. The other night I was sitting down with my wife, and we have a lot going on in town with different issues that have to come up, and
Mhm.
I've kind of been off Facebook a little bit, just breathing a little. And so I opened up the newspaper, and there's my mug. There's an article. So it's just kind of
Mhm.
it's still very fresh and new to me.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
It's a
Very
cool new though. It's a cool
yeah,
experience.
yeah.
Imagine, your daughter, you said you tienes una niña, so
Hmm.
knowing that, your stomping grounds are and leaving footprints for her to just
Yeah.
follow and even achieve more so. It's exciting as a parent, as
Hmm.
a Latino, as an American, like, oh, just
Yeah.
the fact that your daughter's gonna look back and be like, my dad did all of
That,
this
yeah.
and
That's
more.
my biggest the thing I'm most proud of is that she's going to grow up in this city, and regardless if I do this long term, or if I this is a one term thing, whatever it ends up being, I'm going to leave my stamp.
Impact.
We're building parks, and we're
That's amazing.
changing our climate policies, how we look at things, and you know we're going to do a lot of good here. And hopefully, I know she'll know that I had a part to do in that, and I think
That's pretty
that's what I
cool.
want her to know.
That's
Pretty awesome.
amazing. That's amazing for you. So we're very happy for you. We're very excited. And again, I don't think this is going to be a one-term type of thing for Willy.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll
We'll
see
see.
what comes next for Willy. And we'll definitely, hopefully you're still taking our calls too.
Yeah,
But
we'll
yeah,
catch back with you and be like, "Hey, Willy, come back on the show," So,
Governor Linares.
Oh, wow.
Gobernador Linares.
Well, if there's food involved, I'll be there.
Oh, look at this guy. It's amazing. Speaking about food, we just had, if you haven't heard the podcast yet, we had Jose Garces, which is an Iron Chef.
Seven time award-winning Iron Chef, first Latino chef.
Ecuadorian. He did his thing too. We got to dive into his mind, and
Pretty amazing.
pretty amazing, guys. So if you talk about food, you got to talk about Jose Garces.
Yeah.
For sure. Willy, pues ya no te quitamos tiempo, dude. We thank you so much for your time and just letting us dive into it. Just one last thing, man, for that Latino that's listening to the podcast right now and that's planning to go into politics, but just needs that little push. What would you inspire, or what would you tell that person that's listening to you?
Yeah, I think I would just say, like, you can. You are worthy. You are capable of doing this. It's, half, I don't know. I don't have a percentage. But when we doubt ourselves or when we don't go for what we want, it's us holding ourselves back. So, whatever it is you want, go for it, and even, I've seen people run in here and locally that didn't win, for example, ran again and didn't win again, ran again and finally won. Or like,
Awesome.
Whatever it is, find that way. I think the great philosopher Too Short once said, get in where you fit in,
Hey.
and that's the reality. Is if one door closes, go after that other one, and keep sight on what that goal is, and sometimes that goal you don't even know, right? Like I had no idea that I would be a council member. I had no clue, but it's put me in position to where, I can do good, and that's always been who I am, is wanting to do good for my community. So sometimes you end up in a different spot.
Right
Well, I
on.
think you landed in the spot this time, dude.
Yes.
So
Yes.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
thank you
Yeah,
for the
thank you,
time,
Willy.
Willy. We'll catch you soon. And again, this podcast was brought to you by Los Abogados de Tu Lucha, serving all of Northern California. If you've been injured at work, if you need someone to speak up for you, get you the right medical treatment, if you feel like you're not being heard in your workers' compensation claim, then seek out for the Abogados, and you can find them at Abogados Tu Lucha and social media everywhere, Facebook, Instagram, and you can also find them online at tulucha.com. Willy, we'll catch you on the next one. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Willy.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today. We are the Latino Nation podcast presented by Latin Live. I'm your host, Carmen Ramirez, joined by my co-host and founder of Latin Live, Eric Osuna, produced by yours truly, and our second engineer and editor is Francisco Patch Fuentes. Our tech director is Jose Moreno. Our graphic guru is Laura Tinoco. And we're executive produced by Mr. Eric Farber himself. Latino Nation is produced by Hustle and Flow Productions.